Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated will be filming, recording, and photographing this event for use in Delta promotional videos, photography, advertisements, social media platforms, web pages, and other future Delta events as the case may be. Via continued participation in and by continuing to remain logged into this event, hereby acknowledges that participant may be photographed, filmed, or otherwise recorded while on the premises of the event. Grants Delta and licensees replicable consent to include participant's name, likeness, photographic image, mannerisms, and voice or other recording in the production or for exploitation for any purpose whatsoever throughout the universe in perpetuity, represents, warrants, and agrees that Delta holds and shall forever hold all display, publication, and ownership rights, licenses, and privileges to any and all media, whether in law or in equity, which may be ascertained, registered, or in any way utilized with respect thereto, and waives, releases, and transfer, as the case may be, any and all such rights, whether in law or equity, as may be necessary or required to effectuate Delta's establishment of ownership. Participant further agrees to abide by and comply with any and all terms of use and or additional participation rules as applicable and specified during relevant sections of the program, and acknowledges, understands, and agrees that violation of such participation rules shall result in legal recourse and disciplinary action.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Renee Moore. On behalf of the Fairfax County Alumni Chapter President, Helene Fisher, and the members of the Financial Fortitude Committee, it is my pleasure to welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. Our presentations are offered to assist you in building a strong financial foundation. Tonight, we will focus on an in-depth look into estate planning. At this time, please give your attention to Soror Angelina McCarthy-Bryan, our Financial Fortitude Committee Coordinator and Moderator for the evening, who will introduce our guest speaker. Soror Angelina?
Thank you very much, Sarah Renee. I appreciate that warm welcome. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us on this Friday evening. You all could have been anywhere, but you are here with us, and we do not take that lightly at all. We have an amazing session for you this evening, and I do not say that lightly. We have before you, and I will introduce and read her bio for attorney Amy Griffin. She is back with us for the fourth time, ladies and gentlemen, fourth time. Again, she is someone that we enjoy, delight in, and more importantly, we learn something new every session that she joins us in. So first, we want to take a quick look back so you all can see where we have come as a Financial Fortitude Committee, the information that we bring forth to the community that we hope is touching each one of you. We also want to welcome everyone and ask that you feel free to come off of your videos and come on and show your beautiful faces. And most importantly, we'd love for you to interact with us through the chat. We will allow you to provide information and questions in the chat. And let's just say, for those who do participate in the chat, there may be a little something for you. So remember, participation does pay off in tonight's session. So with that, I am going to share my screen and give you all a look back as to how we got here. And let's start by first sharing that we are here tonight to go over building a strong financial foundation, hosted by our Fairfax County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and the Financial Fortitude Committee, an in-depth look into estate planning. Of course, tonight, where you are before us, and we again have Amy with us and joining us tonight. So without further ado, we will take our look back. So we began our sessions and started with our building a strong foundation. What's important here is we talked about our fundamental principles to create your own blueprint for a successful financial future. We led that into an amazing session that discussed generational wealth and building strategies. We had before us Douglas Eze and Eugene Mitchell. And they came, and these are amazing gentlemen who are both authors who shared with us about the wealth gap. Amy first joined us back in 2021, and I cannot believe we're in 2024. So that just tells you all how she has been with us, and she focused on estate planning. This was the first introduction, if you will, to us meeting Amy. Along with that, I discussed long-term care in our session about understanding long-term care. We also had 7 strategies for transforming your finances with Mr. Jason Howe, who also is an author. And he is an amazing one at that, and has also been featured on many financial shows. In addition to that, we brought back our Building a Strong Financial Foundation and Building Our Blueprint. And then again, Amy joined us in 2022 with taking an in-depth look, but we are now going to take you even farther. We were brought by our amazing panel of guests. We had Eugene Mitchell, Jason Howe, Amy Griffin, Tremaine Wills, and I, who came and discussed closing the wealth gap. In addition to that, we brought to you this amazing session about cryptocurrency 101. And we brought Ancila Ramsey with us, who is also an author, and shared some great strategies. We brought together a total of, and again, this is very, very exciting because we don't often get to do this, but we brought a total of 4 chapters before you here to come and present the Closing the Wealth Gap Reimagined. We were joined by our sister chapters below, and boy, what a session it was. It was an exciting session and an educational one. Then we wanted to understand more about the psychology of financial decisions that we make, the whys behind our financial decisions. And we were joined by author Kavette Miner-Kane, who came and truly helped us understand where we fall from a financial standpoint when it comes to our psychological decision making. We took us even farther and decided to go into real estate, investing and obtaining equity in your residential property. We were joined by Olabakala Dele, which is Miss Buki, who really brought the house down with some wonderful mortgage and understanding savings and loans with regard to purchasing property. And it was such a well-received session that we had to bring back even more. We brought Melvin Landry Jr. and Blair Binder, who are recognized in the real estate industry, and they also brought us amazing knowledge to take back and continue on. Our authors, as I shared, Eugene Mitchell. Also, we had Douglas Eze, Jason Howe, and of course, Ancila Ramsey. In addition to that, Kavette Miner-Kane, and these sessions were truly, truly helpful. Now, with that, we always want to share here our disclosure statement. This is an informational presentation. Please note that individual situations can vary. Neither the information presented nor any opinion expressed constitutes a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any product, service, or specific security. Neither Fairfax County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated or its members of the Financial Fortitude Committee are endorsing any individual, investment, product, or service discussed. Please consult with your financial advisor, financial services professional, tax, legal, or accounting professional before making any decisions. And again, brought to you by Helene L. Fisher, President of Fairfax County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Now, think about your finances and think about your finances as a house. It helps to really picture what we're here to do today. You have to start with a strong foundation. We call that our protection phase. Then we want to grow and accumulate our wealth and then position ourselves into preservation and eventually distribution at some point. Now, when we're talking about protection, the first level of your house should include things like wills, power of attorneys, medical directives, in addition to trust, emergency savings, debt management, charitable continuance, health insurance, auto insurance, home insurance, disability income insurance, long-term care insurance, and life insurance. So if you're looking at the screen thinking, I don't have any of these things, or maybe I have one, or maybe I need more, then we have professionals before you. So please take advantage of communicating with our professionals or any professional that you feel comfortable discussing. And when you're building your home, you should always be analyzing your cash flow, your net worth, risk management, college funding, retirement planning, and wealth accumulation. Now, this screen here, we all want to stop and take a look at, because most people don't plan to fail. They fail to plan, and we do not want that to be you. Now, this screen is one of my favorites. Why? Because before you, you are looking at beautiful, successful women who have joined together, joined forces to help us understand our estate planning. This before you is Life and Legacy Counselors, the Griffin Firm, PLLC. They focus on faith, excellence, relationships, service, and trustworthiness. Now, if this doesn't make you stop for a moment, I don't know what will. Now, with that, I am going to now read our bio for Amy. And this bio, as I want to share with you, Amy is full of knowledge. So before us, we have attorney Amy Griffin. She is, and of course, a business and estate planning attorney. She is admitted to practice in Massachusetts, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. She's recognized by the Small Business Administration as a Massachusetts and New England Small Business Champion through the development of the New England Black Chamber Commerce, Black Chambers, and the U.S. Black Chambers. Amy works to build businesses for profitability. Amy is the principal attorney of Life and Legacy Counselors of the Griffin Firm, PLLC, and founder of the nonprofit, the Association of Black Estate Planning Professionals. Amy serves with her voice to support economic development as the General Counsel for the U.S. Black Chambers, Incorporated, and National African American Institute Association. Amy is committed to supporting community growth through education and speaks regularly at national, regional, and local forums to educate other attorneys and the community. Amy is an adjunct professor at the Western New England University School of Law and a monthly contributor to the Washington Informer newsletter. Informer newspaper. She strongly believes when we know better, we do better. Without further ado, I'd like to present to some, and for those who do know, our precious Amy. She is with us tonight. Amy, we thank you for your time, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I will honestly say that this is one of my favorite opportunities because, of course, I had this. I will honestly say, don't tell me, but I've always had this like Delta desire. But you know, I just appreciate you ladies and the work that you do and the impact that you have on the community in such a great way. And the fact that you all do this financial foundation, this fortitude, is so impactful for the community. The work that you do is, and I don't say this because I'm not a nice person, y'all know that if you've been around the time, I'm just an honest person. So I say really what I fervently believe and the work that you do, because so many people don't realize or appreciate estate planning as part of the financial picture. And I know that it is part of that whole circle. So thank you for having me. I truly, truly, truly appreciate it. And for all those folks who are willing to be here on a Friday night, thank you for being here.
And Amy, before you even, I almost forgot, and I hate to interrupt, we have one other item to share with our group while we have them, because this is going to lead into all your sharing. We like to make sure that we understand if there is, a key positioning for us. And when I say that, I mean, we want to have great participation. So we're going to have a poll that is going to be brought up first, because it's going to key into what Amy's going to talk to us about tonight. So if we could, ladies and gentlemen, before you, we have a question, and we would like for you to answer the question. And it says here, what percentage of Black Americans do not have a will? Is it 50%, 70%, 25%, and 10%. So we're going to give you an opportunity to go ahead and respond here. Later on in our session, after Amy concludes her discussion, we will be asking this question again to see if your knowledge has changed your response. So we're giving you all a few more minutes here. Please go right ahead and answer this question. What percentage of Black Americans do not have a will? Few more moments here. Coming up on almost 1 minute. Lock in your final answers here with this. Okay, and we're not going to share the results quite yet, but we're going to end our poll. And with that, Amy, all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. That's, I'm going to probably give that answer away during out this week, but they've already submitted their answers. But okay, I start off with a more updated, but not completely updated picture of the firm. Again, Black Girl Magic, we really appreciate the opportunity to work. One of the joys that I have in my life is being able to work with Black women, because we know that we have the compassion, the commitment to excellence. And this is what we do, right? This is what we do. This is who we are. And so I show this picture for two reasons. One of which is, I think it's a powerful image. But what's important about this also is that when you identify someone that you work with as a trusted advisor, which we know there is safety in the multitude of counsel, so we should have trusted advisors. I think Tony, who's on this picture is on here as well. But what we know is one of the reasons why it's important to know the team with whom you're working is because we're not going to be here. Remember, I'm an estate planning attorney. I know that tomorrow's not promised for any of us. And so what I encourage people to do is that when they identify someone with whom they work, identify what's the bench look like. When I'm not here, I say to people all the time, I want you to have this real ugly cry, but know that we still got you, because it's not just about me. One of the reasons why we changed the firm name is because it's not just about me. And we have a team that if you work with our firm, you'll have a multitude of relationships that you will build, because we know that we're better together. Just a bit, again, talking a bit about who we are, is that our mission is to educate, which is why I'm always thrilled to talk to this group, because education is paramount. Our people perish for the lack of knowledge. But we educate, collaborate, and strategically plan with individuals, families, businesses, and communities to build, hear me say this, multi-generational wealth. It's not just wealth for the next generation, but it's multi-generational wealth if we can plan collectively. And that is what leads into that bridging that racial wealth gap, because it's multi-generational wealth building. And then our vision is we are a premier global network of professionals who support the creation, protection, and transfer of wealth. And I say all that to say is that when you identify someone with whom to work, make sure that your vision and your mission align, that it's not just about someone who says, oh yeah, I do this, because this is an intimate relationship. Anybody who works with your money stuff is intimate. You got to feel really comfortable having the conversation about, okay, yeah, I got these kids, but I don't really trust that their spouse is going to do the right thing, or that we know that our children may have spending issues. All of that stuff, we got to feel comfortable having that honest conversation. So don't just feel like just because someone is the professional that you should work with them. Make sure that you align with them. It's an intimate relationship that I don't take lightly. Now, I love, again, that you have had these series of conversations. And for me, of course, I'm a little biased, but all of those things fold into that estate plan. The long-term care planning, the insurance planning, the financial investing, all of that rolls into the estate plan, because all of those things together help determine what does your life look like, what do your kids' life look like, and their kids' life look like, if we strategically plan. And so we think about the charitable giving. Now, I'm sure each and every one of y'all on here who are a member of the Fairfax alumni chapter have in your estate plan, or intend to have in your estate plan, your chapter, right? Because I have learned very specifically that that's an important element, because we know that you've given during your lifetime, you have every expectation of giving after you've passed away. So we get to do that. We get to plan for that, but only if we plan. As Angelina says, if you don't plan, nothing happens that you want to happen. It happens what the state has, right? And so actually I was meant to say that we have a firm that serves DC, Maryland, Virginia, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Florida, and New York now. So I'm excited about that because we're better together. Now, here's an example of what happens if you're not quite thoughtful about how to plan. Many of us loved Prince, right? And he was strategic. He was brilliant. But he didn't have an estate plan. I'm sure that he didn't expect to pass away as early as he did, but none of us know the day or the hour, right? And so unfortunately, he didn't have anything in place, even though this amazing genius gave tons of charity during his lifetime, made hordes of money, but when he passed away, he didn't have anything in place. And, there were lawyers that got paid handsomely, which I'm cheering on my brethren for. But I don't know if y'all remember, there was a brother in Denver State Penitentiary who said, that was my daddy. He said, Prince was his daddy, right? He wanted to get a piece of it. And so they had to go through all the efforts and all of the legal actions to prove that he wasn't. And then what happened was the money was distributed amongst Prince's siblings. We don't know who, what, when, and how, but we do know lawyers were paid. And so I encourage people to be very thoughtful about making sure that those that you love get what you want them to have. Aretha Franklin took the efforts of making sure she had the most phenomenal funeral, but decided that she got this. She could figure out her own estate plan all by herself, right? Oh, Prince paid $370 million in taxes. Riri paid $8.1 million in taxes. A lot of people say, okay, you know what? I don't have that kind of money, so it's not that big an issue. But depending on who you are, where you are, you may have those taxes. Like one of the things that we know in Maryland, there's an inheritance tax that we have to be thoughtful of. Steve McNair. Now, y'all are in Virginia, so you may not have a Baltimore appreciation. Now, I will tell you, I don't have any football appreciation, but I do like to talk trash. But Steve McNair is, he's dead, God rest his soul. However, let me tell you, for those who, I don't know if anybody knows how he died. Steve McNair was murdered by his mistress. So I tell people that the first lesson that you'll hear from me is don't have a mistress, right? Because if you have a mistress, you have a chance of getting killed by your mistress, right? So secondarily, he had a mama that he loved, bought a house for, but didn't pay off the house. His wife was the executor for his estate, and he did not make any allowance for the house to be paid off. And what happened was, as a result, when he passed away, there was still a mortgage to be paid, and mama didn't have the money to do it. And so mama had to move. So I encourage people to take care of the people that you love. Again, if you saw that our core values is first and foremost faith. And so I'm a person of faith, and we're supposed to honor our mama and our daddy, and we're supposed to plan for them. They've taken care of us, even if they didn't take care of us well in the way that we thought of, but it's our responsibility to take care of our parents. I say those folks who nobody loves and they don't love nobody, they don't need to have an estate plan. But other than that, we know that we are impacting those people who love us. So we should have our plan together. And then Osceola McCarty. Osceola McCarty is the woman who's holding the Bible. She died in her 90s. She didn't have any biological children. However, she knew that it wasn't just about having biological children, but we have a commitment to people who live beyond us. So it's not just biological, it's our community children. It's our spiritual children. It's just those folks who come after us. As a result, this woman who was a laundry woman, not like she was a stockbroker, or she was a good government employee, none of that. She was a laundry woman. And she left $150,000 to the University of Southern Mississippi. And she said, for colored kids who wouldn't be able to go to school. Now, y'all are big time. Y'all are all college grads. And so can you imagine how Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated would be impacted by your giving? No, I'm not saying that you have to, but I'm just saying that you have the opportunity to, right? To give as you pass away. So I have my legacy because everybody gets to decide what they want for themselves. And again, I have this firm which will live beyond me because I'm not that significant, right? I get to plant the seed, and scripture says, write the vision, make it plain so those who can see it can run with it. And so I'm writing the vision so that other people can run far beyond when I'm gone, that this firm grows, continues to grow and those people who are there can run with it. And so multiple generations will be impacted. The bottom left-hand corner are a picture of my babies, my son and my daughter, right? And my son's son and daughter, my son's daughters, right? Now, both of my children are married, and I know that they love their spouses. But my God has told me to take care of my kids, right? Let me say that their parents should have them in their presentation. My job is to take care of my kids and my kids' kids. And so what we know is that, for those of us who are thoughtful about how do we protect our bloodline, that's a responsibility and opportunity that we have. I'm not saying that you don't want to take care of your in-laws, and you may love them dearly, your in-laws, and I do love, my son-in-law very well. But we need to know that what we decide for ourselves is a plan. This is my plan. You don't have to worry about yours. I am a member of Kingdom Fellowship AME Church. And I point that out to say that I'm a tither during my lifetime. And I have the opportunity to be a tither when I've passed away. Again, I say these things not to say that you need to do it, but it's like, what is your passion? What is your love? You get to create that opportunity for those that come after you. And again, I am the founder of the Association of Black Estate Planning Professionals. And so in thinking about those things that we love, and one of the things that I need to update my bio to identify the fact that I'm general counsel for the Bow Collective, which is a group of Black women business owners that come together. Because what we know is what you know as a sorority is that we are indeed better together, and we can make a huge impact as a result of our coming together. Now, I want to point out that what we do, what's important to us, right? And so I added this slide to point out, first and foremost, I am an art lover, right? And so I love Charles Bibb. So if you in my house, in my office, you'll see Charles Bibb's art. And for me, that's one of the ways in which I invest, because art appreciates. Many people, the Harriet Tubman Silver Dollars Out, coin collectors, being thoughtful of how you want to invest your time and your money. And I say that because we all have different values, but I want us to be thoughtful about what it is we want to give towards, how we want to give. Now, the bottom left-hand corner is a 2007 Honda CR-V. Now, I drive a 2007 Honda CR-V. And I point that out to say, I'm trying to keep it to 2027, because for me, it's about my values. I don't have a value in cars. As long as I can get from point A to point B, that's how I am thoughtful. Because to me, that's a depreciating asset. And I put this in there so that people can understand and appreciate we all need to do what's important to us. Right? If you drive a Range Rover, I ain't mad at you, right? You got to do what you need to do. But everything that we do ties into the life and legacy. Everything that we do ties into what is the long-term goal, impacts our long-term goal. So I encourage you to be thinking about what is it that we want to invest in? What are those things that we want to just sort of default to, right? And many times it's that we have for today. Now, we have a pyramid, a family legacy pyramid. First and foremost is, am I okay? Right? You know how they say in the hospital or the airport, put your oxygen mask on your face first, right? Am I okay? Do I have my retirement set up? Do I have my long-term care set up? Do I have beneficiaries that will identify who's going to take care of me when I need to be taken care of? All of those questions are about, taking care of myself first? Then the next one, is my family okay? Right? If I'm not okay, I can't really plan for my family. And I challenge you to not think of family solely by legal and biological definitions. think about family based on the people that you love and the people that love you. So do we have the capacity have we put into place those things that we want to care for those others? Right. And so being mindful of my business succession, making sure that my business that I have taken the energy to build is either passed on to my loved ones or is able to support my grandchildren to go to college. All of those things we need to plan for. And the pinnacle is my community okay? Right? And then my community being my sorority, my church, my loved ones. What does that look like? We get to be able to make that decision and make an impact about our community. And that indeed is the family legacy pyramid. And we need to start from the bottom and work our way up because it doesn't make sense to do it the other way around, right? We can't make sure that we're giving a charity and our kids are homeless. We got to be thinking about all of that in a way that it's in decency and in order, right? All right. Now, foundationally, these are the foundational documents. Now, I know that the poll said, do you have a will, right? How many folks have a will? Now, what I want to say to you is that the foundational base things are three things, not just a will. But the first one being the durable power of attorney. The durable power of attorney is a document that gives somebody capacity to act on your behalf for financial matters, right? And there are two ways that we can do it. We can have that it is valid from the moment that we sign it, effective immediately, or we can say that it is effective upon a triggering event, which is called a springing power of attorney. That means when I become incapacitated, if I've disappeared for a certain amount of time, you get to create whatever is that springing, triggering event. If it means that I am, incapacitated, I get to define what that means. If it means that I have been, two doctors have said, okay, no, Amy is unable to make decisions for herself, or is it that I have a group of people who say, oh no, Amy is not acting in her right mind? We get to identify that, which is a part of the joy of being able to craft this, right? And we can make it as broad or as specific as we choose it to be. One of the things that I tell people is I am a professional pessimist, right? Now, I will challenge you to think differently or deeply. I will challenge you to say, okay, what happens if the person you want to, and many times your spouse, isn't there? Who's the backup? And then who's the backup to that backup? As well as, do we have a check and balance in place in case that you have kids and we don't want one kid to sort of exploit the others, right? Take advantage. So all of those things we factor into that durable power of attorney when we plan accordingly. The second part of that three-legged stool is the healthcare packet. First thing is, who speaks for you regarding your healthcare when you can't speak for yourself, right? Who is that going to say they want to be on life-sustaining treatment or not? Who is then identified as what decisions, how will they make those decisions? It's not just because they say, okay, no, we've spent enough money, but it's about what I want for me. That's the advanced directive living will. If I want to be on life-sustaining treatment. The HIPAA waiver is, there are people that you don't necessarily want to make the decision, but you want them to understand what's going on for you. You want them to understand what your status is, and they can be able to have conversations with their healthcare professionals. And then finally, what is the end of life celebration look like? I had a mom who called me because she wanted to sue her son-in-law for, she said, burning up her baby. Her daughter was cremated. And so we know greed and grief are the two G's that we get to guard against, right? But if we don't have stuff in place, we're subjected to that which happens, as opposed to identifying what we want to happen. And then there is the last will and testament. The last will and testament, hear me say this, it directs the court probate process. So often people see on TV the reading of the will and think that's really a thing. Now, I know some lawyers who do readings of the will. Now, I don't feel like you should pay me to do something that you can do for yourself, because, my time is what we pay for often. And so the reading of the will doesn't mean anything, because your reading and my reading is the same exact thing. There are times when you may want me to interpret something, and that makes a difference. Yes, I'd gladly do that. Or sometimes people want me to read it because they want me to be the bearer of bad news, which is okay. But I want you to understand that it has no legal significance. It identifies who do you want to have, who do you want to have whatever. And it also identifies who is your guardian. But again, nothing takes place until the court signs the order. And so that's really the trick to it. That's confusing for many people. Right? Now, the power of attorney. Who will handle your finances when you're unable to? What we know is that, unfortunately, if you're in the hospital, they will not say, okay, we'll stop the mortgage, right? They're not going to say we're going to stop the car payments. Those things will still become due, but we want to have someone to manage them that is responsible. Pookie, as your oldest child, is not necessarily the one that you want. I tell people all of the time that just because you want your child to rise up to be what you want him to be upon your passing or your incapacitation doesn't mean he can. When people show you who they are, believe them. And it's not because they want to be, it's because that's who they are. And so if they are a spendthrift, they'll be a spendthrift. And the additional emotional distress that they're on is just going to exacerbate who they are, as opposed to create for them the capacity to stand up. Right. I encourage people to identify someone who's going to manage their finances, someone who we've seen manage finances well as shows integrity. The love of money is the root of all evil, not money, but the love of money. And so sometimes that temptation thing can be a significant carrot that we encourage people to not be swayed by, but we got to put in place those supports. Again, sometimes what we identify is checks and balances for our powers of attorney. And we say, okay, you have freedom to do a certain amount, up to a certain amount of money. After that level, then you need to have someone co-sign for you. So we encourage people to be thinking about, one, we want to make sure someone who manages their finances regularly, then they can manage yours as well. We don't want them to learn to balance a checkbook on yours. And then Terri Schiavo is that woman that we've heard about. Most of us have heard about in Florida, whose husband wanted to, she was in a persistent vegetative state. And her husband said, Terri would not want to live this way. She has been on, she had to be in a, providing nutrition and hydration through tubes because she was in a persistent vegetative state. Her mom said, as long as she's breathing, she's living. And we're going to continue to allow her to live by feeding her. 15 years she was in this persistent vegetative state. And what's painful is, that the mom loved her and her husband loved her. Unfortunately, they couldn't even find comfort in one another because they were at odds, because they didn't know what Terri would have wanted for herself. And after going to the Florida Supreme Court, the court sided with her husband and created an order that said she would be able to pass away naturally. John Pierre Adams was in a coma for 39 years. He had just gotten a knee replacement surgery, and there was a mess-up, a medical malpractice mess-up. Unfortunately, he led him to be in a coma, and his wife cared for him for 39 years until he passed away. Again, we don't know what he would have wanted, but unfortunately, because nothing was written, but his wife were just subjected to caring for him. And so while she, I'm sure, loved him, not many people would want to put their loved ones in that level of distress. And then, if you don't have a alternative plan and you have a will, what happens is that your loved ones go through the probate process. And when you pass away, so what happens first and foremost is that someone would take my will to the court, if I have one, and they say, Amy died. And the court will put a notice in the paper that said, okay, Amy died, does she owe you any money? If she owes you any money, come forward. And the, Sears and Roebuck, student loans, hospital bills come forward. They say, okay, this is the amount of money that Amy owes me. Then that has to be paid before my loved ones are paid. In addition, the court fees are based upon the value of assets that I have. The more that I have, the more that it costs. And so I feel like this is one of the greatest governmental scams we got going. So many times people lose their houses as a result, because if I owe the hospital $50,000 and I'm not liquid, that means that my family doesn't have the $50,000 to pay. The house would have to be sold in order to satisfy that debt, right? And so I encourage people to be very thoughtful about how do we protect that stuff. In addition to life insurance, there are two things that I think about with life insurance. First and foremost is that a lot of times we want the life insurance to cover the funeral. If you leave it to your children and they, get that check, they may or may not choose to use it for the funeral. Now, we have a lawsuit now where the daughter used her money for the funeral and the son said, nah, that came to me, that's mine, I got it. You got to do what you got to do what you need to do. We've been in court literally for 4 years through this process. So what we know is once we give a beneficiary in a life insurance, or when we have a beneficiary for payable on death for bank accounts, it's theirs. You can't determine what they do with the money once they've had it. So I encourage people to be very thoughtful about how do we plan for it. And then if you have a minor child and you haven't made a plan for that minor child, it goes into a trust that the court oversees, right? So you have to plan accordingly. And then what happens is when that child turns 18, all of that money goes to the child, right? Which is now an adult. Now, I don't know about y'all, but when I was 18, I wasn't all that wise. I didn't make those best financial decisions. And if you gave me that great big check right then, the chances are good that that check will be gone. That will be gone very quickly at 18, because I wasn't that bright, right? And so I think about, and I encourage other people to think about, how do we plan to protect our loved ones that once they turn 18, and they may not be as dumb as a rock like I was, but clearly they're ignorant based on the fact that they just don't know no better because they are 18, right? And wisdom teaches us a whole lot of stuff. So I encourage people to be thinking about how do we protect and plan for our children and our children's children. Now, the other part about probate is that if you don't have a will, the probate court decides who gets what, where, what, and how. And it's not because of, a lot of times people think, oh, it's going to go all to my spouse. I mean, a lot of times people don't want it to go all to their spouse. But in any case, there is a formula that the court creates, and it depends on where you live. The district has a formula, the Commonwealth has a formula, Virginia, as well as, each state has a slightly different, and it ranges. So if you have a spouse, and I mean a spouse that is legally married, right? Because sometimes we get married without getting married. We get divorced without getting divorced, right? So if we have a legal spouse, then it has a percentage of your assets go to your spouse. And then the balance would go to your children or your parents, right? So it is a thing that we get to figure out that's based on the state that you're living in and the structure of your family. And sometimes we have children that ought not have the money directly. Sometimes we adopt children without really adopting them. We adopt our grandchildren without really adopting them. And so one of the things I tell people all the time is you can disinherit a child, but you can't disinherit your spouse unless you live in Georgia, right? Don't move to Georgia, just get divorced. But, make sure that you have planned, because what happens if you, like, a lot of times people say that, the Google lawyer will tell you, we've seen people say, oh, just give them $1 in your will. No, in any state besides Georgia, upon your passing, your spouse can say, I want what is called the elective share. That means the share of the estate that I would have if there was no will at all. Right? And so your spouse gets that percentage of what would be if there was nothing at all. So I encourage people to make sure that you have the plan that is necessary to either, to either avoid your spouse getting what they get, what they would get electively by planning it accordingly. Or if you're in agreement with your spouse, it's not an issue. But know that it's not a matter of they get everything, because that's not the way that it works. And oftentimes what happens is we have spouses who are, without a plan. Like, let's say we have a house and I get 40% of the house. Your spouse can't typically live in 40% of a house, right? They may end up losing their spouse and their house in the same time. So we need to be thinking about what we want as an outcome, because sometimes our kids and our spouse are not in agreement. I encourage you to avoid probate as a result. The easiest way to avoid probate is putting beneficiaries on all of your stuff, right? And you can do a transfer on death deed in Virginia, which means for your house, you maintain ownership during your lifetime, but when you pass away, it goes to whom you choose it to go to, as opposed to it going through the probate process. And you set up beneficiaries on all of your bank accounts, and then those assets, will avoid probate. So we need to be thinking about how do we strategically plan to make sure it goes to the people that you want it to go to in the way that you want it to go. We get to plan for that accordingly. If you do not have a power of attorney for health or finances, what will happen is, and you're no longer able to make a decision for yourself, what happens is the guardianship proceedings take place. Now, I say that whenever there is a court proceeding, you're paying for lawyers. In a guardianship situation, you're paying for 3 lawyers, right? That the person who is disabled has a lawyer, and it may be court appointed. The person who's petitioning to identify that there is a disability has a lawyer, and then there's a neutral lawyer, typically called a guardian ad litem. All 3 of those folks are paid by the assets of the person who's disabled. Now, once that is engaged, then the court will therefore say that, they will go through all the rulings, first and foremost, to determine that the person is unable to make decisions for themselves. And if they're the petitioner wants to serve as the guardian, if indeed that person has good enough credit to get a bond, or good enough credit, and can pass a background check so that they have not had any criminal background history, even if they've reformed themselves, that doesn't matter, right? They have to be able to pass the background of the court, and in order to be appointed as the guardian for the person they love. If there is not a person who can fulfill those expectations, then a court appoints a legal guardian who is a neutral. And while that is good for the field of the law, it's not so good, because that means it's a lawyer who doesn't necessarily love you, but is able to provide support for you. And so the problem with that is they don't make decisions that are emotional, that are in your best. They make decisions that are practical. I'm not condemning, I'm just making this statement that oftentimes with that, real property is lost because they're not trying to preserve the homestead. They're saying, if you're not going to live there, we're going to sell it. And so unfortunately, so much is lost when that happens. So I encourage people to be thinking about, how do we protect those folks? Oh, that's a long way. To make sure that we're able to build for our loved ones. Okay. I forgot to apologize ahead of time, because I knew I was going to do something technologically not right. All right. Now, we said the foundation is the power of attorney, the healthcare packet, and the last will and testament. If we move beyond the foundation, we think about the fact that if you have a minor child, you should have a standalone standby guardianship designation. What we talked about earlier is that the will does identify who is the guardian for a minor child. However, I want everyone who has a minor child to have a separate document that speaks to the standby guardianship designation. And I want a backup and a backup and a backup, because your child is the most important thing to have. I care about that far more than I care about any of the money stuff that you have. I want to make sure that the person that you identify to care for your child is the person that you want to care for your child. We don't necessarily want the creepy Uncle Jimmy to say, oh, I'll take care of your baby, right? We want to make sure that the people that you love, the people that you trust, and the people that you honor are the people that take care of your child. And I want a backup and a backup and a backup, because we don't know who's going to be there when we need them, but we want to make sure that the people that you love are in place. We had a tragedy in Prince George's County in 22, where there was a couple who was in a car accident, and they were both killed. And that was May 22. We didn't get into court until November 23. And so as a result, their minor child, one of the children aged out in that time frame. The other one, we had fortunately, not fortunately, it took that long to get into court. And then we were able to expedite it because he needed surgery. But the significant financial loss as a result of the delay. I mean, some of the delay was based on the fact that COVID made everything so far behind. But what we know is you don't want your children caught up in that way in any way. So I encourage people to be very thoughtful about how do we protect our loved ones. Then let's go to the trust. There are two categories of trusts. When I'm talking to regular folks, I say revocable and irrevocable. When I talk to highbrow folks, which y'all are typically the irrevocable and the revocable, right? The revocable trust, it's Friday night, so I'm saying revocable trust. Friday night, right? So, and I'm tired. But the revocable trust means you can change it every other day. It's an extension of you. And I want people to know that you have total control over the assets. You avoid probate. It's completely private. And so it only is the rules that are in the revocable trust and the irrevocable trust are only the rules that the trustee knows, the grantor knows, and the beneficiaries know. As a result, we get to make those kinds of statements. We get to be bold with it. However, and it's unlike a will. The will is completely public. Once you have passed away, anybody anywhere can go to the court and pull up your will and see what you got and who you gave it to. That, of course, creates vultures. That creates an opportunity for someone to read it and knock on your door and say, oh, I'm sorry for your loss. Let me buy your house on pennies on a dollar, right? And so I encourage people to know that, one, we want to protect our assets and protect our loved ones, because oftentimes they are grieving. And sometimes I've had too many people who say, I don't even want to live here anymore because my loved one died. And so the vulture comes at that time, and then they take advantage of them. So I encourage people to be very thoughtful about how to protect their loved ones. So the Revocable Living Trust is a legacy builder. We have the capacity to create rules for multi-generational wealth building. In so doing, we get to say that not just am I building for my kids, but for my kids' kids. We get to create strategies, rules, and plans for multi-generational wealth building. One of the examples that I use all the time is in my trust, it is, you can't use my money for any depreciating asset. You can buy it all for you can do anything you want with your stuff, but with my stuff, it's all about learning and building for the future. Right? Now, a revocable living trust, again, is the legacy builder. However, you have total control, uses your social security number as an identifier. As such, it's like a business that I call a sole proprietorship, which is doing business as. So while it protects your assets from going through probate, it maintains privacy, but it has the same sort of identity as you. So if someone were to sue you, it has access to the assets in your revocable trust, right? In addition, it counts as a part of your estate. So everything that's in your revocable trust is included in your estate. Why that is important is that if you have an estate that exceeds the estate tax exemption level, it's taxed. Now, Virginia doesn't have an estate tax on its own, but there is a federal estate tax. Right now, the federal estate tax is about $13 million. And so many people say, oh, I'm good. However, know this, that first of all, y'all in Virginia have property that has significant property value. So oftentimes that's counted. That will bring you up without even knowing. But also in 2025, that estate tax exemption level comes down to about 5 or 6 million. And it's not sure exactly what it is because it's triggered in by the cost of living. But what we know is that your life insurance is included, your real property is included, your retirement's included. All of that is factored in. And if it exceeds the estate tax exemption level, it's taxed at 40%, right? Which is huge. So I encourage people to know what that is, what to think about that. That's why understanding the revocable trust, all of that is included in your estate. The irrevocable living trust, I said, remember the revocable is like a sole proprietorship doing business as. An irrevocable living trust is like a corporation, and LLC. And what we know is that's what we use as a shelter, a tax protector. And so we call the irrevocable living trust an asset protection trust. The revocable trust is a legacy trust, and irrevocable living trust is an asset protection trust because it doesn't count as yours. We use that when we're doing an irrevocable living trust for the benefit of someone needing long-term care. We use that when we're pulling stuff for the special needs trust. And we use that when we're pulling assets out of the estate. For example, when you exceed the estate tax exemption level. But what we know is, much like a corporation or a limited liability company, there are some distinctions that we need to do to make it seem like it's not totally yours. So you lose some control. While it is not true that we can't make changes, because we can, but there are some limitations and some restrictions on how we do it. It's more complicated to see how we do that. But it doesn't count in your estate tax, and then there is a process to change the terms. And then we know that if you have a business, you need to strategically have a business plan too. Because if you have a business that's a corporation or an LLC, because remember, that's its own entity, it should have a strategy and estate plan as well. That's we call the succession plan, right? So in talking a bit about the revocable living trust. Now, I don't know if Tony is on our is on here. And Tony, if you can put your email in on here, and we can send out this slide, because this is the part that people always ask me about, and I can't, and I don't have enough time. We could go hours on just the difference between a revocable trust and an irrevocable trust. But the revocable trust, if you look at it again, it has its total ownership and control, right? As opposed to the irrevocable trust, where you give up some of the ownership, you give up some of the control in order to make sure that it's outside of your estate. And so, there's no creditor or lawsuit protection. But what we know for the revocable trust, but the irrevocable trust has total creditor protection, lawsuit protection. And a lot of times we put businesses in the irrevocable trust. And then that way it doesn't count as part of your estate. And in addition, if something gets sued, it doesn't touch your personal stuff. And so that separation creates this whole strategy about how do we protect our personal versus our business stuff, right? And so having those conversations of what that looks like and what that means, right? Now, I know I'm going over time, but I want to talk about real property, because in many cases, that is where our net worth is. And so legacy building, when we have a house, I always tell people real property appreciates and money evaporates. So with our legacy, being thoughtful, if you have multiple children and you leave a house to 3 kids, the chances are good the house is going to be sold. I say real property appreciates, money evaporates. So you need to think about, how do we plan for that multi-generational wealth building? How do we do that? How do we strategically plan for our kids? And in many cases, I tell people to put it in trust. And so that we're able to make sure that our kids, all of our kids can benefit multi-generationally, right? They can benefit from the income of the property. Capital gains. Don't put your kid's name on the deed with you. Now, what happens is the house that what you buy your house for is a tax base. What you sell your house for is often the difference between what you buy it for and what you sell it for is capital gains. And so that is taxable. So I encourage people to be thinking about, how do I protect that? How do I make sure that indeed our kids get a step up in tax basis? When you pass it on through a transfer on death deed, when you pass it on through an inheritance or through a will, they get, it's as if they bought it for the fair market value at the date of death. If you put your kid's name on the deed with you, it's as if they bought it for the same price that you bought it with. And I use my former neighbor as an example in Northwest DC, that they bought their house for $17,000, lived there for 50 years. And now the property is worth I'll say 717,000 for my math's sake. And so the gain would be $700,000 on which is taxed. So I encourage people to not do that in 95% of the time. JTROS is joint tenancy with right of survivorship. That's the last man standing law. That means that if many people who buy their houses with their spouse, then when whoever dies first, whoever survives owns it singly, right? So it's the last man standing law. And that typically works well when it is the perfect family, right? When it's not a blended family. When it's a blended family, then let's say, for example, I'm a blended family. If my husband, who is a Black man in America, dies first, then it stays with me. The house stays with me, and then it would go to my kids conceptually, not allowing for his kids to have any benefit. So I encourage folks to be thinking about, how do we want to make sure and honor all of the relationships? A reverse mortgage is when someone pulls the equity out of their property, a senior citizen pulling the equity out of their home, not paying for it. Now, it doesn't come due until someone has either passed away or doesn't live in the house for 9 months. Unfortunately, I've seen circumstances when people don't tell their loved ones what they have. And so one of the things that I try to remind people is, tell your family that you have a reverse mortgage, because the interest will continue to accrue. Unfortunately, if that happens and you haven't been forewarned, and there's a long life, what will happen is that what is owed is far more than the value of the property. Many times our loved ones want to redeem the property by refinancing it, but you can't do it if it is, if it's underwater. So I encourage people to tell the loved ones, because then they can pay the interest. They may not be able to pay the whole mortgage, but they can pay the interest, and then they can make it so it is attainable after you've passed away. And then I want to talk to you about that. If indeed there's no one who wants the house, be thoughtful about charitable giving. How do we plan accordingly? Now, and then planning. Now, again, Virginia doesn't have estate tax or inheritance tax, but those people who have properties in other states need to be thoughtful. If you have property in Maryland, Pennsylvania, knowing that there is an inheritance tax, and you need to be thoughtful about to whom you're receiving. In addition, if you're having property in multiple states, know this, that you have to probate in each state that you have real property. So I encourage you to be thoughtful about that. If you have heir property, knowing what that looks like. What is heir property? Heir property is if you have a great-grandmother who has multiple heirs, or who had tons of children, and he had property that she owned, and it went to, we didn't do the probate process, but then my grandmama has it, and there's multiple people in her generation, and then my generation, there are 48 people have interest to the property, and nobody's name's on it besides great-grandma. That means that's heir property. And in many times, there's many situations that there is a whole problem because we cannot make any decisions about it. We can't even get a roof fixed because you have to have ownership to be able to make that happen. So I encourage people to, if you have heir property, depending on the state that you're living in, because there's a lot of action upon trying to redeem heir property, because that's how Black people in the Black communities are losing property, land, right and left, because they're not making any more land. So I'm encouraging people to be thoughtful, but how do we protect that? Heir property is lost because many times people stop paying the taxes and then people redeem it and then we don't own it at all. Oops. All right. Now, the traditional approach to estate planning is that when I have, let's say I have 3 children and I have $900,000, I'm gonna give each child $300,000. And I want to encourage people to not think of it that way. I want to think about building enterprises for multi-generational wealth building. Instead of dividing it, building that enterprise and saying how we're going to move from each generation to generation to have greater wealth. Let's not divide, but let's collaborate. Let's bring our children together to create an enterprise so that there is multi-generational wealth building. That I encourage people to have life insurance on their grandchildren that's owned by the trust, so that they can, borrow against it so that they can go to college and put a down payment on the house. And then when they pass away, it goes back into the trust. So we have multi-generational wealth building. Again, it's all about strategic planning, and it's a mindset that we don't give all of the income of the trust away each year, but we just give a percentage of it. It's an entrusted way approach to managing the estate so that the trust continues to grow year after year after year for multi-generational wealth building, that we can be thoughtful and strategic about how do we plan. I'm not going to go into our long-term care planning because we don't have a lot of time, but know this, that when the long-term care strategies they're going to tell you to distribute those assets or spend down, and then you lose your house. But I want people, if indeed you have long-term care considerations, to make sure that you meet with someone to avoid it, because we want to make sure that we're preserving wealth for multiple generations. But I'm going to talk a little bit about wealth building through business ownership, because many of you are business owners. And I encourage you to be thinking about how do we structure our business in such a way that there is multi-generational wealth building. First and foremost, we need to build it and establish it in a way that makes long-term sense. We need to build it with the end in mind, thinking about, and I say this to anybody, no matter what the business is, think about structuring it in a way that's not a DBA, using your social security number as an identifier, doing business as a sole proprietorship, but doing business as a limited liability company or a corporation where it's building outside of yourself, not using your social security number as an identifier so that it can live beyond you. Any company that is built on your social security number must dissolve when you pass away, because it cannot live, your social security number can't go on beyond you. So I encourage people to be thinking about, how do we structure it in such a way? How do we build it in such a way that there is capacity to be sold? I want everyone to structure their business so that it can be sold, because even if you don't ever intend to sell it, it creates a different capacity, because we're not going to be here always. It creates capacity for your children and your children's children to have revenue from it when you're not operating anymore. Because even if you sell 90% of it, then your kids can have 10%. So I want us to be thinking about, how do we continue to build? And in addition, when we structure it that way, it creates a different mindset. So it's not about us. It creates the capacity for it to go on, and it operates at a different level when it's not, you don't have the expectation that you're going to manage it. In addition, when you think about succession, we talk about the 5 Ds: death, disability, divorce, departure, and dissolution. Those are the things that we structure and how we build on what makes difference for building our business to live beyond us. Now, with that, we're ready to ask questions.
Wow, 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 Amy. I hopefully speak for everybody on the line today when I say I thought I had a whole notebook with all of your wonderful jewels, and I literally was on page after page after page. So we are not going to belabor the point. We have so many great questions. We want to thank you all for your questions. If you have any more questions, please put them in the chat. Again, You may receive something special if you do. So I want to turn it over to our SARA, Elsie Daniels, who is going to ask our questions, and then we will proceed from there. So Elsie, please. Thank you.
Hi, Amy. Thank you again for coming back and giving a great presentation as always. We have quite a few questions, so we're going to try to get through as many as possible. The first question that I see is, life is so short. How early do you suggest one begins planning for their estate plan?
So I say this to people, and a lot of times people are boggled by the fact that I say at age 18, you should have your first estate plan, because that's when we become an adult, right? And you have the right to privacy. And I tell people the story all the time that my baby girl was in college and in a car accident and in the hospital. When I called the hospital, the lady said, I really shouldn't, can't tell you anything. And unfortunately, I couldn't reach for the phone and choke her, but because God was protecting both of us, because she said, but I'll tell you she's okay. But at 18, we have the right to privacy. So at that time, we need to put in place those things that can support and help us.
Thank you for that. Our next question says, in Maryland, how difficult is it to place your home in a trust for your grown children? Is this advisable?
Yes, in Maryland, and Maryland, and I could spend a whole hour talking about how Maryland is challenging. In the DMV or even in the East Coast, it's probably the worst place to die if you're married and you have issues with your spouse. So, but it is not difficult at all to put your real property in trust. And what we do is everything that you have should be, what I say, tethered to the trust, right? So, because then has the rules that are applied to it. So one thing is creating a trust, and the next thing is funding the trust. That means tethering those things to it. And by putting what we do is create a deed that deeds the property to the trust, irrespective of the fact that there's a mortgage on it, right? You don't have to have had paid it off in order to be able to put it in trust.
That is good to know for all those parents out there who own property. Think about your children.
And especially, I always think about the fact, now, of course, I'm jaded because I'm a professional pessimist. I love my children. I want my kids, my biological and my husband's kids, to have access to property, not their spouses. And that's one of the things that we can do to protect our children's from having our stuff tied up in any divorce kind of consideration.
Makes sense. The next question is, are federal student loans just discharged upon death of the borrower? And does that also include Parent Plus loans taken out for children?
Doesn't include Parent Plus loans, right? So what happens is, for as long all of your debt, that's why I avoid probate. My goal is to avoid probate, because my debt will die with me if we don't go through probate, right? Because remember, I was saying with the will, you go through the probate process, they put the notice in the paper that says, do you own any, do I owe any money to anybody? And they can respond and get money accordingly. But if I die and I don't go through probate, my debt's right next to me in the casket when I go through my cremation, right? As long as there's no co-signers.
That makes sense. Will there be copies of the slides provided? Because the presentation was wonderful. People want to know.
Certainly, and I guess that's what I was saying, that Tony can send you the picture, the slides. If did Tony, did you by any chance put your
Yes, Tony put her email in there in the chat a couple times. If you all scroll down, you'll be able to see Tony's response there. She did. Thank
yeah.
you.
And then you can send.
Someone asked, can you claim minors as beneficiaries? Their daughter is currently 6 months old.
Oh, how precious. No. So you can, in a way, so I can say it can be for the benefit of, but they can't receive anything, right? So that's why you have a trust and a guardian, because they can't own anything. And so if you put something in trust, and then you put the rules as to how they can receive and who receive. And one of the things I always want to point out is, again, I talked about guardians. Sometimes you want to identify a guardian who will be nurturing, loving, and caring, but they may not be all that good with money, right? And so that trustee that you put in place should be good with money.
Right, that makes sense because you don't want somebody wasting your money that you worked hard for.
Exactly. And also you want your kids to have the benefit of. And sometimes you have those really nice people who just like can't really say no. They feel really bad for them and they, it, spoil them. No, you with someone who's going to say no, that you can get not a Tesla, but you can get a Toyota Camry. Right? That sort of person that you can have. Identifying those rules that you put in place.
Yep, makes sense. Someone did state that about going through probate, that their late mother owed a vet bill and Bank of America filed a claim on her estate to be paid in probate in California. So your debts do follow you, so keep that in mind.
That's right. There are tons of people, their full-time job is just to watch to see who died.
Someone asked if a parent has a beneficiary on all their assets and still has credit card debt, will the debtors come after them? Will the debtors come after the beneficiaries?
No.
All right. And someone wants to know, with standby guardianship designation, would the person you're giving legal guardianship to be have to be present when writing up the will with the attorney?
So yeah, what is required is that they don't have to be present, but they need to sign. They need to sign a notarized signature that they accept that standby guardianship designation.
Okay. And that's in addition to naming somebody in your estate, like your will.
So right, so in the will, you don't have to sign it, but because that doesn't happen until the court process. But the standby guardianship designation requires that that person sign that standalone document, because those are two separate things, right? So we want that to come into order. 'Cause remember, the will doesn't go into place until the judge signs it. But the
Right.
standby guardianship designation goes into place upon your incapacity.
And sorry for all the follow-up questions, but
Fine.
I know you said to have a person, a backup person, a backup person. So do all those people have to sign?
Yep.
And then is it important for one's estate planning attorney to be a member of the NAELA?
NAELA. So NAELA is the National Association of Elder Law Attorneys, National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. So no, and I will say that I have been, I'm intermittently a member. And so there are two things. One, they should be competent. So having the conversation and the competency to make sure that you understand, they know what they're doing, right? And I say what I like about the fact that NAELA is, we know that they're an elder law attorney, just like doctors, right? You can have a cardiologist and a podiatrist, right? So you don't go to a real estate attorney or a divorce attorney for an estate planning, right? Many times you see those attorneys, law firms where they said services provide. I do everything from A to Z and I'm a solo practitioner. I doubt that you can have the highest level of competency when you have all of those different things when you're just one person. So I encourage people to be very thoughtful about being very specific and making sure that they indeed have the level of competence that you need. NAELA does give that that level of certainty that we know that people do. NAELA, there's a number of designations that we can assure that they have that knowledge base.
All right. Our next question says, I only have one biological child. What estate planning do you recommend? I will definitely be doing a living will and end of life planning.
So what law school, the answer to every question you ask a lawyer is
It depends.
Right? And so there's a lot that has to do with that one child, right? It also has a lot to do with your planning. Now, again, I am a multi-generational wealth building focus. So if your kids have kids, I'm trying to focus on your grandkids. I love your kids, but I love your grandkids more. And I'm trying to protect those assets and build those assets for multi-generational stuff. So the answer is it depends.
Makes sense.
And I also always, no matter what the structure is, I'm trying to avoid probate.
Yeah, because they will take your money.
They will take your money, right? And remember the creditors, right? And so that's the only way. Now, what you know is when you pass away, you can't even open somebody else's American Express bill when they passed away. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Someone wants to know if you've heard of the father of Fannie Willis, who testified today about taking out a reverse mortgage in California, and if you have any insight on that.
So I saw a bit of that today, which is rare because I took the day off. So I saw that. But it is reverse mortgages again. There are, for me, there's a very rare time when I think reverse mortgages work, because I'm again trying to build multi-generational wealth. Reverse mortgages work when you're not trying to plan to pass something on. So
Makes sense. Could you talk about the trust, life insurance, and wealth building strategy? I'm not sure if you can do that within this environment, but they may just need to make an appointment to come see you, but an overview if you
an
can.
overview of what we know is a life estate. Life insurance is a great way to create an estate. For those folks that haven't like saved up hordes of money, a life insurance policy is an easy way to do it. There are two ways, one of which is you take it on yourself, and then you know that money can go directly. But what we know is the older you are, the more expensive it is. So when you have, I tell people, when your grandchildren are born, that first 6 months is when it's the cheapest that it'll ever be. So because you're 6 months older than you are. So at that time, buy a huge, as much as you can afford, life insurance policy and put it in the trust. They can borrow and put rules. Again, I'm a professional pessimist, I think, and I'm controlling. But you put that money in the trust and you put rules on it, like it's for college or for any wealth building endeavor, right? They can use it as a down payment house. But I say to people all the time, make money available so that they can do whatever they need to do, have the tools to do what they need to do anything, but not so much that they can do nothing. I encourage people that we need to be planful of how do we anticipate we want them to grow their stuff. Like entrepreneurship, we can put resources again, but put rules around it, right? We don't want them chasing things that they don't have any capacity for, but we want to think about if we're giving birth to the Steve Jobs or the Robert Smiths, all of those folks, we want them to have the resources they need to do what they need to do, but not some crazy kid who's going to just say, okay, mom, I have this next idea. Right. So
Yeah.
building all that structure. But what we know, if we have life insurance in place that for our kids and our grandkids, we know that each generation there's going to be an infusion of money to build it to the next level. But we want the rules in place too.
That makes sense. And you actually answered 2 questions in one. Do you have any comments about the Virginia 529 plan or the 529 savings plan in general? And someone said that they've been contributing for the past for their 15-year-old child, but I'm not sure how
Awesome.
long they've been
Again,
contributing.
again, it's all about multi-generational wealth building and making sure that you have what you need to have, but also making sure that you have the rules in place that if you have a child who isn't going to go to college, make sure that the 529 plan has what you need, but doesn't tie up the child, right? Because there's sometimes I had this one client who was like, okay, my kids got to go to college, but they also have to get a trade thing. If they can be electrician, but electrical engineering, but they also have to be electrician too. Right? They can be a chemist, but they also need to be a cosmetologist, which I think is fabulous, but we need to make sure we have the resources necessary and available for them to do that.
Makes sense. How often should one change their will or estate plan?
One of the things that we do in our firm is we have what's called a planiversary, right? Because we know that you should look at stuff every year. Now, as I've grown up, I'm not gonna say we're old, but grown up, is that time seems to go by so quickly. And so oftentimes you look up and like, how did this time go by so quickly and things change? So if we look at our stuff annually at the planiversary, it compels us to say, okay, do I still like the people I liked? Do I still have the stuff that I have? I can make the changes without thinking about, oh, it's been 4 or 5 years. I'd rather have you look at it and say, oh, no, I didn't get a new car, or I didn't get, or I still have all of this stuff, or I didn't get a new account, because I don't want anything to fall out of alignment.
Right. Someone wants to make sure they heard you correctly when you said that they should not add their child on the deed of their home, and how do they pass the home to their child, and avoid probate?
So I said 95% of the time, I'll say, don't put your kid's name on their house. Now, depending on the state that you live in, you can do a transfer on death deed or a life estate deed that avoids probate, right? You retain ownership during your lifetime, but you pass it to your loved ones when you are, when you've passed away. That's the easiest way to do it. Alternatively, you can do it in a will. Of course, I don't want to go through probate, but I don't want to do that. But then you can also put it in a trust. Remember, a trust, especially if you have multi-states, assets or real property in multiple states, then I definitely want you to encourage thinking about putting it in trust. As well as for those people who want to make sure that the house is not sold ever, right? Or the land isn't sold forever trying to build it. That's a great reason to have a trust, because you can put the rules in place, and also protecting it from those potential divorces. Again, I'm that professional pessimist, so I think about all of those things that can go awry.
Yeah. Should you have a pay on death on all types of bank accounts?
So the answer is we're avoiding probate, because the answer is it depends, right? Because again, if you remember this, so oftentimes if you just turn over all your money and stuff, it's like winning a lottery, right? All of a sudden someone's getting a check, or this big check. Are we comfortable with that? But what we know is lottery winners are 4 times more apt to file bankruptcy than a typical person. So I feel like we need to think about, it depends if you have people who are financially responsible and are used to dealing with the level of money that you're giving them, then it's not an infusion of a lottery winnings, right? But if they have, if they're used to it, if they are not, I'm not comfortable with them getting a payable on death, because that means that money is going to evaporate.
Would you still recommend making a will if you don't have anyone to leave your assets to?
Absolutely. Because this is the thing, it's going to go somewhere, right? You get to make a decision, even if it's not your family, if it's not blood relatives. And I'm good with that, because, sometimes blood relatives aren't the people you want to leave it to. But I don't want us to ever limit our definition of family to the people who are legally or biologically connected. I want our definition of family to be those people that we love and love us. Doesn't have anything to do with legal relationships. And if not, if we don't love nobody loves us, we got charities that we have. Y'all have Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated. So there's somebody that you won't leave it to. And we don't want to make it just happen by what the court decides.
Makes sense. Can you repeat how the government and personal student loans can impact your estate?
So again, it is that it's a debt, it's a creditor, right? And so when you pass away, if you're going through probate, it's going to go, the creditors are going to come forward first. And so we want to make sure that we decide who our stuff goes to. And if nothing goes through probate, it doesn't give the allowance for someone to take it away.
What are your thoughts on family foundations?
Oh, we have tons of people who are strategically doing family foundations. One, it's creating their own 501c3. It does a number of things. It creates the legacy of giving, which I love, right? And we are teaching and engaging our loved ones, our children and our children's children, to be a part of that giving mindset, and that we're building it for multiple generations. I love doing family foundations.
Right, something to think about. If your life expectancy is greater than your term life insurance, is it worth having?
So what's the answer to that? Every answer to a good lawyer says it depends, right?
Yeah.
So while your life expectancy is one thing, now I don't know, but you don't know the day or the hour. I would identify if there is an opportunity to get more life insurance that's not term, because what we know is that we are thoughtful about how do we plan for the future, right? It's worth having because we don't know what tomorrow will bring. We can jump, anything can happen anytime. We don't know the day or the hour.
Yeah. Can you briefly reiterate why I should have a trust versus a will, and a trust in addition, and or a trust in addition to a will?
So a trust avoids probate. A trust is private. A trust creates capacity for legacy building. A will is expedient, but it only can go to the next generation. You cannot plan for it beyond it goes here. And it's a public thing. So anybody anywhere can read who got what, where, when, and how from your will, right? And so you can't provide, and again, you're paying the court costs, you're paying creditors, you're paying the publication, all of that stuff, which makes a will less delightful.
What are your views on prepaid funeral expenses?
So I have no problem with prepaid funeral expenses because, of course, it goes against having the cost of living, because we know everything goes more expensive, right, in time. So that's a benefit. And it also takes away from the distress of your family trying to find the money to make sure it happens. Number one. Number two, the struggle with it, however, is many times you have to make sure you do it with like depending on the chain that you're doing. And sometimes people go with a local funeral home. The problem with that is you may move, right? But there are many times if you can get it with a organization that has sort of this chain, so that wherever you go, it follows. So I just encourage you to be thoughtful about how do you invest in that plan in a way that one provides the comfort, but also follows you. I have some people who are trying to put their family plot or their plot on the market because they moved.
Wow, this is just amazing, Amy. All these questions are coming in and we are rolling through them. Elsie's doing an amazing job. So we just want to point out a couple of things because we don't want to forget some housekeeping that we need to make sure we do as a committee. We adore the fact that we had over 70 representatives here tonight joining us. Thank you to all of the attendees. We are so appreciative. We would like for you to take a look at the chat at this very moment. You are going to see a wonderful message populating for you now. You will be able to see that there is a link here. If you can please click on the link. We really, really want to know how we are doing. So please kindly complete the link there. Let us know what topics you are interested in. If you want us to bring Amy back for the 5th time, I am sure Amy will be delighted to do so. But with that, please complete the survey for us. We do want to wrap up. We have a few questions to wrap up here. It is 8:02, so we do want to be respectful of your time. Please kindly note we will take Pat Evans' question as our last question this evening, and I would turn it back over to Elsie to continue. And in the meantime, please, ladies and gentlemen, take a look at the poll that is populating right now. The poll is coming right up. We'd like for you to answer the question now that Amy has given us a lot of information. We need to know if you have changed your thought process. So we will have our tech team bring up the poll, and please go right ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, complete the poll for us right now. We're going to give you the answer to this question. And I think everybody really probably knows the answer after listening to Amy's amazing, amazing presentation. I'm just looking at our chat, and Pat said, yes, bring Amy back. So you've got some love out there, Amy, for the 5th time. We've got folks saying, bring her back. And so we will definitely look to do that, and let us know that in our evaluations. So we're wrapping up the poll here. So please put in your last questions here as far as your poll responses. And 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. You got to love it. I have a 5-year-old, so I'm used to counting all the time. So this is why you are hearing me count. So with that, we have 70% of our participants today state that they believe the response to the question of what percentage of Black Americans do not have a will. And the answer is 70% do not have a will. Now, why is this so important? You heard Amy share a lot about individuals. Was anybody aware that actor Chadwick Boseman, when he died, he did not have a will? As Amy shared, Prince did not have a will. She also shared that Aretha Franklin, who we all adore, also did not have a will. And it is kind of maybe not a shock to some and a shock to others that we really do need to have estate planning in our back pocket. We need to talk to a financial professional, an attorney, to discuss these areas. And what we have found is overall 33% of US adults have a will, okay, according to caring.com's 2021 will and estate planning. Meanwhile, only 27.5% of Black Americans have one. So this is very shocking, maybe to some, not so shocking to Amy, because it's what she does every day. But we really need to change this statistic, ladies and gentlemen. So with that, we are going to turn it back over, and we appreciate your time for a few more minutes to answer the remaining questions. And then we'll be back with our thank yous after we are done with questioning.
Could I also, if anybody who's on this gathering is interested in introductory conversation, they can sign up with through a link. Tony, do you have the link per chance? I don't know if she does.
Yes, I can post it.
Okay. But again, I want to, my aspirational Delta life.
And just so you know, it's never too late to be a Delta. We've got a lot of SARs on here tonight. And Tony, we also want to thank you for joining us this evening and assisting Amy as you were doing through our chat. And again, ladies and gentlemen, please feel free to provide any of your notes in our chat, any thank yous you'd like to give to Amy, because we will make sure that she receives them. So if you liked it, if you loved it, even if you thought it wasn't that amazing, although I doubt that you thought that, let us know, because we're always here to improve. We'll turn it back over to Elsie. Thank you.
All right. Who controls the trust once it's created?
So again, it depends. So the revocable trust, the person who's the grantor who created it is the trustee and makes the decisions or implements whatever. And then the successor trustee is the person who comes after. And you get to pick who that person is. Oftentimes, we identify someone that we love, or what I'm trying to encourage people to do is create what we call trust councils, so that when we're raising up our children to understand what's important and how do we implement multi-generational wealth building. But it is, again, and then there are people who identify professional trustees as well.
Makes sense. Is it more strategic to buy insurance or use a 529 plan for grandchildren's college expenses?
Well, again, what's the answer, Elsie?
It depends.
And so it truly does depend on what your finances, and sometimes it's not a or, it's an and.
Yeah. Someone says that they have a sister-in-law with no children who they would leave their 4 children with in case, if they who leave their 4 children with in the care to raise, but the sister-in-law is not so great with money. Their best friend is the person that they would trust with their children. How does that relationship work? And the best friend and the sister-in-law live in 2 different states.
It's okay. It's okay. But what I encourage people to think thoughtful about is like if you have a little child, it's not catastrophic to move them from one place to another. But if you have a kid who's in high school and they have just lost their parents, you don't really want to destabilize them that way. I think about they're giving up, all of their friends, and with kids in high school, their whole identity, who they've struggled to be, it's very difficult. And so I encourage people to be very thoughtful about that. And many times what we've had circumstances where the family member can move to where the children are, and that makes it easier. But again, thinking all of that through, because the answer is always it depends.
Yeah. What happens when the person you designate to be the executor of your estate decides they no longer want to be responsible for your estate after you pass?
And that's why we have a backup and a backup to the backup, because there are some life circumstances change. People go through stuff. And so not that they may not want to, but they may not be able to. And so that's why we have a backup.
That also makes sense. I think the next one was a continuation of the sister-in-law best friend question. That was in case the person and their husband both passed away at the same time. What is your advice on where to start if a spouse has Alzheimer's, and there are stepchildren? Can the spouse execute legal documents on the husband's behalf, the one who does have Alzheimer's?
The answer again is it depends, right? So there is a standard of expectation for those people if they have capacity. So identifying capacity is not as easy as it sounds, right?
Yeah.
Because if the spouse is no longer able to make decisions, they can't give you the power of attorney. And then that's when a guardianship would be. I would recommend a guardianship, especially if it's a blended family, because what we do know is that's when it's going to get ugly.
Yes. And someone did want to mention for all us Deltas out there that we can leave our assets to Druff if you have no one you love or no one loves you. So,
Or in addition to the people that you love.
in addition to also, just making sure we don't have any more questions.
No, Elsie, I think we have one more that was sent to you. I believe it might have been sent to a different participant. Take a look at your
I
personal.
see a few more. I
Okay.
see 3 more, and then if you are okay with the last 3 questions, Amy, and then we will wrap up for the evening.
Okay.
For someone says, what is your advice on where to start if you're, nope, wow, sorry, the chat keeps moving. People are saying thank you in this moving questions. What are some of the myths you hear about why Black people do not invest in a will or estate plan?
So often people say, I don't have anything. I don't have anything because I don't need to do it well. Right.
Yeah.
And so what we know is we have far more than we think about. The other thing is, that we don't trust the government to manage our stuff in general. Right. We don't want to be involved. So therefore, we're going to just sort of opt out. But but the most reason is because we're procrastinators. And then I have people who say, if I do something, I'm going to die. Right. I say, if you don't do something, you're going to die.
You're gonna die either way. You either die prepared or die unprepared.
That's right. We can write a will, and it can, or a estate plan, and it can sit for decades, and it's still, just because you have it doesn't mean you have to use it immediately. But it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Exactly. Someone said their mother recently signed a waiver of bond that her sister presented to her after their grandmother passed away. What does that mean?
So whenever someone passes away and there's no will that waives the bond, a bond is the insurance policy to guarantee that that the personal representative will do the right thing, right? And so they have the opportunity to say, okay, no, we're not going to spend the resources of the estate to purchase a bond because the bond is based on the value of the bond is based on the value of the assets of the estate. Right. And so by waiving the bond, you waive the need for that insurance policy. Right. It doesn't mean that she waives the right to question or her or distribution of her assets. It just waives the need for the bond.
All right, that makes sense. And then do you provide services for, I know you said Virginia, a lot of states that you provide services for, but how far into Virginia do you go? Because Virginia is
huge,
too large a little bit.
So one of the things that we realized is when COVID hit is that we can do anything by Zoom mostly, right? And what we do is what we've done is we only need to be in person for the signing. And so what we do is, depending on how far away you are, we do mobile notaries.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we can. The answer is we can.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer all the questions and staying a little later than we had originally promised, but we appreciate all of your time and wisdom and for sharing with us. And hopefully this will be a stepping stone for people to be proactive about getting their affairs in order because we don't know the day, hour, or time.
Excellent. Excellent. It's truly a privilege.
Wonderful. It has been amazing. Thank you very much to our committee. We want to, of course, thank you, Amy, Thank you to all of our tech team that are with us. Thank you to Renee and Elsie, and also to our SAR Regina Ware, who will be coming to give us our final words. And again, we do have information in the chat. Please, 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 everyone, answer the evaluation for us. It does mean a lot, and we do read every single comment. And so we are excited that you all joined us this evening. And we even have our last comment here. Lots of thank yous, Amy, to you. And we have someone down in Florida who says, I need you. So that's what we've got. I know we need to spread you all over. So with that, I will turn this over to Sarah Regina Ware. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of our chapter president, Helene Fisher, who could not be with us tonight, and the 150 plus members of our chapter, thank you, Amy, for always answering the call when we decided to invite you to come back and speak on estate planning. I have been to all of the presentations and I've learned something every time. So we appreciate you always answering the call. And also thank you to the participants for coming. I've been looking at the comments, the questions were thoughtful. And so make sure you fill out the survey so that we can keep putting on events like this that can help us build generational wealth and prepare us for those untimely events in our lives. So thank you so much and have a good night.